The bright control panel lights flickered as Lieutenant John Harris struggled with the failing systems of his small scout ship. The vessel shook violently, alarms blaring through the cabin as it plummeted through the atmosphere of the uncharted planet below. Mayday, Mayday. This is Scout Ship Delta 7 to U.S. Voyager. I've lost engine control and life support is failing. I'm going down on the unexplored planet at coordinate sector 4-79. Request immediate. The communication system died with a shower of sparks. John gripped the manual controls, his jaw tight as he fought to level the craft enough to survive impact. The ship's hull glowed red-hot from atmospheric entry, and the window showed only fire and chaos outside. In the final moments before impact, John thought of home, of Earth, of all the things he might never see again. The ship crashed through a canopy of purple-leaf trees, the impact throwing John against his restraints before everything went black. Hours later, John woke to the sound of soft chirping. His head throbbed, and a warm trickle of blood had dried on his forehead. The ship lay at an odd angle, embedded in rich, loamy soil. Light streamed through the cracked viewport, casting rainbow patterns across the damaged control panel. System status, John croaked, his throat dry from smoke inhalation. A weak computerized voice responded. Life support, offline. Engines, offline. Communications, offline. Emergency beacon, damaged. John unbuckled himself and stood unsteadily. He gathered his emergency pack and pulled out a handheld scanner. The air outside registered as breathable, slightly higher in oxygen than Earth normal, but safe. At least he wouldn't suffocate. The emergency hatch groaned as John forced it open. Fresh air rushed in, carrying scents of unfamiliar plants and a sweet undertone unlike anything he'd experienced. He stepped outside and found himself in a world of vibrant colors. The trees rose hundreds of feet into the sky, their trunks a pale blue with those unusual purple leaves forming a distant canopy. Small creatures resembling butterflies, but with 6 wings of glowing green, fluttered peacefully among strange flowering plants. The ground was covered in soft, moss-like growth that seemed to glow faintly where he stepped. John's scientific training kicked in. He began cataloging what he saw, speaking into his personal recorder. Planet appears to have Earth-like gravity, breathable atmosphere. Flora is abundant and diverse. Preliminary observation suggests complex plant life. He scanned the area for fauna, but found only small, gentle creatures. Tiny 6-legged herbivores grazed on low-growing plants, while bird-like beings with translucent wings soared between branches. None scattered at his approach. In fact, several small creatures came closer, apparently curious. The wildlife shows no fear response, John noted. Fascinated. Possibly suggests absence of predators in their evolutionary history. The sun, smaller and more orange than Earth's, was beginning to set. John returned to the ship and retrieved his survival gear. The emergency beacon was his priority, but inspection showed it had been damaged beyond his ability to repair with available tools. Looks like I'm stuck here until Voyager realizes I'm missing and comes looking, he muttered to himself as he set up a small shelter near the crash site. That night, as strange stars shone overhead, John tried to process his situation. The ship's computer had calculated he was at least 4 light-years from the Voyager's last known position. Even at maximum speed, it would take a rescue team weeks to reach him. And that was assuming they knew where to look. John watched the glowing plants around him pulse with soft light, matching what seemed to be the planet's natural day-night cycle. In the distance, he heard melodic sounds that might have been this world's version of nightbirds. For a deadly crash landing, things could be worse. The planet seemed peaceful, even welcoming in its way. Food and water testing would come tomorrow, but for now, he had emergency rations. As sleep began to claim him, John didn't notice the faint tremor in the ground beneath his temporary shelter, nor the shadowy figures watching him from the edge of the forest clearing. Figures with gently glowing skin who had never before seen a being like him. Morning came with a gentle glow that spread through the forest. John woke to find himself surrounded by tall, slender beings with pale blue skin that shimmered with faint light. He reached slowly for his stunner, but paused when he noticed their posture, curious rather than threatening. The tallest being stepped forward. Its body was thin and graceful with 4 long arms. Large eyes, completely silver with no visible pupils, studied John with open wonder. The being made a soft humming sound, and to John's shock, he felt rather than heard words form in his mind. "You are not of our world. What manner of being are you?" John stood carefully, keeping his movements slow. "My name is John Harris. I'm a human from the planet Earth." The being tilted its head. Another wave of thoughts reached John. "I am Vex, elder of the Lumari. We have never seen a being like you." More Lumari moved closer, their skin pulsing with gentle colors that shifted from blue to purple to green. John realized the colors matched their emotions. Their curiosity was visible in the shifting patterns across their bodies. "My ship crashed," John explained, pointing to the wreckage. "I'm stranded here until my people can find me." Vex extended one long hand in a gesture that somehow conveyed both welcome and caution. "You may stay with us while you wait, but your nature, it troubles us." John frowned. "My nature." A younger Lumari moved forward, its skin flashing yellow with excitement. "You consume other beings. We sense it in your mind." John realized what they meant. "You mean food?" "Yes, humans eat plants and animals to survive." The gathered Lumari pulsed with a deep red color that John somehow knew meant distress. Vex's silver eyes widened. "You hunt. You kill." The concept seemed to cause Vex physical pain. "We have to eat to survive," John said. "Don't you?" The younger Lumari touched the soil with its lower hands. "We absorb nutrients from the earth and sun like the plants. No being on our world consumes another." John looked around with new understanding. That explained the fearless animals and the harmony he sensed in this place. This was a world without predators, without the evolutionary pressures that drove life on Earth. "Come," Vex said after a long pause. "We will show you our home." The Lumari led John through the forest to a clearing where structures grew from living trees, shaped into dwellings that blended perfectly with the environment. Lumari of all sizes moved about peacefully, their skin glowing with soft colors as they communicated silently with each other. John noticed there were no weapons, no locks, no barriers. Why would there be, in a world where nothing hunted anything else? A group of small Lumari children approached, their skin flickering with bright colors of excitement. One reached out and touched John's hand, then jerked back in surprise. "You are warm," the thought came to John. "And solid. We thought you might be made of light." John smiled. "No, I'm flesh and blood, like you, just different." An elderly Lumari approached with what appeared to be fruits in a woven basket. "You may consume these. They fall naturally from the trees when their time is ended. No harm comes from eating them." Grateful, John accepted the offering. The fruit was sweet and filling. As he ate, he noticed the Lumari watching him with fascination. "Your people have never encountered other species before?" John asked. Vex's skin rippled with blue light. "We have seen the stars and wondered, but never has another come to our world. Your arrival changes everything." The younger Lumari who had spoken earlier approached again. "I am Zephyr. I wish to learn of your world. How do beings live when they must consume others?" John considered how to explain Earth's complex ecosystem to beings who had never known predation. "It's a balance," he began carefully. "Life and death are part of a cycle." Zephyr's skin pulsed with colors John couldn't interpret. "And your people, do they hunt each other?" John shook his head firmly. "No, we have laws, morals against harming our own kind." Vex moved closer. "Yet you have the instinct for it. We sense it in you, the ability to fight, to harm if necessary." "Yes," John admitted. "Humans evolved as both predator and prey. We can be dangerous, but we choose not to be unless threatened." The Lumari exchanged glances, their skin colors shifting in silent communication. Finally, Vex spoke again. "You will teach us about your kind, and we will teach you of ours. Perhaps there is wisdom in our differences." As night fell again, John wondered what these peaceful beings would think if they knew the full history of humanity, with all its wars and violence. He looked up at the alien stars and hoped the Voyager would take its time finding him. There was much to learn here, on this world without predators. Days turned into weeks as John settled into life among the Lumari. They helped him build a small home near their settlement using fallen branches and leaves that they somehow encouraged to grow together into a solid structure. Inside, John set up his equipment and personal items salvaged from the crash. Every morning, John checked his emergency beacon. He had managed to repair it partially, but the signal was weak. He doubted it would reach far into space. "Your people will come for you," Zephyr asked one day as they walked through the forest. The young Lumari had appointed himself as John's guide and companion. "They'll try," John said, "but space is vast. It might take time." Zephyr's skin rippled with soft green light. "Perhaps it is good they do not come quickly. We have much to learn from each other." John had brought his data pad from the ship. It still worked and contained files from his previous missions. He pulled it out and showed Zephyr a report written by Kate Dixon, the xenobiologist from his ship. "My friend Kate has a theory about species like yours," John explained. "She believes that when creatures evolve without predators, they develop different strengths. Instead of speed or claws, you developed telepathy." Zephyr touched the screen gently. "Your Kate is wise. We have always spoken mind to mind. It connects all Lumari to each other and to our world." John had noticed how the Lumari seemed to sense each other's presence even from far away. Their telepathy wasn't just communication. It was a constant awareness of each other. "Is that why you find it disturbing when I hunt?" John asked. He had been catching small fish-like creatures from a nearby stream to supplement his diet. The Lumari never watched him do this. Zephyr's skin darkened. "We feel the fear of other beings. Their pain becomes our pain. To hunt as you do would cause us great suffering." John nodded. "I understand. I'll try to do it far from your settlement." Later that day, John showed a group of curious Lumari how to make simple tools. They watched in fascination as he demonstrated how to tie knots and weave stronger baskets. The Lumari had never needed tools for protection, but they appreciated anything that helped them care for their plants. "Your mind works differently," Vex observed as John constructed a water filtration system using parts from his ship. "You see problems and create solutions. Humans had to solve problems to survive," John explained. "We're not as naturally in tune with our environment as you are." Vex's silver eyes studied John closely. "You speak of your people with pride, yet I sense sadness in you." John paused his work. The Lumari's perception was uncanny. "On Earth, our predatory nature hasn't always been used wisely. We've fought wars, destroyed environments. But we're learning to be better." That evening, a group of young Lumari asked John to tell them stories about Earth. He described oceans and mountains, cities and farms. The children's skin flickered with bright colors as they tried to imagine such things. "And do all humans look like you?" one small Lumari asked. John smiled. "No, we come in many colors and shapes, though all basically similar. We don't glow like you do, though. That must make it hard to know what others are feeling," another child said. "It can be," John admitted. "We have to pay close attention and ask each other." As the children dispersed, Zephyr remained. "Some of the elders worry that your presence will change us," he said quietly. "Change how?" John asked. "They fear we might learn your ways of hunting, of fighting." Zephyr's skin pulsed with conflicting colors. "But I believe knowledge is never wrong to have, even if we choose not to use it." John considered this. Change isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary for survival. Zephyr looked up at the darkening sky. Our world has been peaceful for as long as our stories remember. We have never needed to fight. You're fortunate, John said. I hope it stays that way. That night, as John lay in his shelter, he reviewed the sensor data from his crashed ship. The planet seemed remarkably stable. Perfect temperature, no major storms, abundant food. Perhaps that explained how the Lumari could evolve without defensive adaptations. He was almost asleep when he felt it. A slight tremor in the ground beneath him. Just a small shake. Then nothing. Probably nothing to worry about. But in the morning, when he checked his sensors again, they showed something unexpected. Movement deep underground, far below the surface. Something large was stirring in the depths of this peaceful world. 6 months passed since John's arrival on the peaceful world. He had grown familiar with Lumari ways, and they with his. His beard was longer now, and his uniform had been replaced by clothes the Lumari helped him make from local materials. The tremors John had felt that night months ago had continued, growing stronger each time. This morning, as he checked his sensors, the readings troubled him deeply. These energy patterns, he muttered to himself, they're not natural. John packed his portable scanner and headed to the Lumari Council Chamber, a living structure grown from intertwined trees at the center of their settlement. Inside, Vex and the other elders were already gathered, their skin colors muted with concern. The earth speaks to us of change, Vex said as John entered. You have felt it too. John nodded. My instruments show movement deep underground. Has anything like this happened before? The elders exchanged glances, their colors shifting in silent communication. Finally, an ancient Lumari named Mira spoke up. There are old stories, she said, her thoughts faint in John's mind. Tales of when the world shook and the deep ones stirred. But none living have seen such times. John showed them his scanner readings. Whatever is down there, it's moving closer to the surface. And there are many of them. The Lumari could not understand the technical details, but they grasped the concern in John's voice. Zephyr, who had been learning to read some of John's language, pointed to a specific area on the screen. This place, he said. It is near the lake where the young ones gather flowers. John felt a chill. We should bring everyone back to the settlement, just to be safe. Vex agreed, and messengers were sent to call all Lumari home. John returned to his shelter and retrieved his emergency pack, which included his only weapon, a small laser pistol meant for cutting through debris in emergencies. He had never shown it to the Lumari. By midday, most Lumari had returned, their skin flickering with confused colors. They had never been recalled like this before. Only one group was missing. 3 children and their teacher, who had gone to the far side of the lake. John and Zephyr volunteered to find them. They moved quickly through the forest, John scanning constantly for unusual readings. The lake came into view, its surface unnaturally still. Something's wrong, John whispered. No birds, no insects. Zephyr's skin paled. I cannot feel the teacher's thoughts. The children are afraid. A scream cut through the silence. Not a mental projection, but an actual sound. Something John had never heard from a Lumari before. They ran toward it, breaking through the trees to see a horrifying sight. The ground near the lake had split open. Emerging from the crack was a massive creature unlike anything John had seen. It was pale white with armored plates covering its body. It had no eyes, but its head turned unerringly toward the small group of Lumari children huddled against a tree. Their teacher stood before them, frozen in terror. The creature opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth. It made a clicking sound that echoed across the lake. It's hunting by sound, John realized. He looked at Zephyr. Take the children. Get them back to the settlement. Zephyr's skin was almost white with fear. What will you do? John pulled out his laser pistol. I'll distract it. Before Zephyr could respond, John moved away from him and picked up a stone. With practiced aim, he threw it far to the creature's left. It hit a tree with a loud crack. The creature, a burrower, John would later call it, swung its head toward the sound. John threw another stone in a different direction. The confused burrower hesitated, clicking loudly as it tried to locate the source of the sounds. Zephyr understood and moved silently toward the children. The Lumari had evolved to move without sound when needed, a trait that now saved them. He reached the teacher and children, guiding them away from the creature. John continued throwing stones, drawing the burrower away from the Lumari's escape route. But as the last child disappeared into the trees, the creature suddenly turned toward John. It had finally pinpointed him. The burrower charged with shocking speed. John fired his laser, cutting a line across the creature's armored head. It shrieked, a bone-chilling sound, but didn't stop. John dove aside as the creature crashed into a tree where he had stood. He fired again, this time hitting a joint between armor plates. The burrower screamed in pain and retreated, sliding back into the crack in the earth. Breathing hard, John ran after Zephyr and the children. The peaceful world had changed forever. Predators had arrived, and the Lumari had no idea how to fight them. The Lumari council chamber was filled with fear. For the first time in their history, their skin colors showed deep red and black patterns, emotions they had never needed to express before. John stood before them, explaining what they faced. "The creature I saw is a predator," he said. "It hunts by sound and has powerful jaws. I believe it's been dormant underground for a very long time." "But why now?" asked Vex, his normally calm voice shaking in John's mind. "Why have they awakened?" John pulled up the data from his ship's sensors. "The energy signature from my crash. It must have disturbed them. My ship emits radiation patterns your world has never experienced before." The realization hit John hard. He had brought this danger to these peaceful beings. The guilt showed clearly on his face. "You could not have known," Zephyr said, touching John's arm. "None of us knew." An elder Lumari named Kale stepped forward. "We must leave this place. Find somewhere safe." John shook his head. "My scans show these creatures are awakening all across the region. There may be nowhere to run." "Then what can we do?" asked Mira, the oldest of the elders. "We cannot fight. We have no weapons, no knowledge of battle." All eyes turned to John. In that moment, he understood why he had crashed on this world. Perhaps it wasn't an accident after all. "I can teach you," John said, "not to kill, but to defend yourselves." The council room erupted in mental voices, some afraid, others curious. Vex raised his hands for silence. "Our people have never harmed another living being," he said. "It goes against our deepest nature." "I understand," John replied. "But these creatures won't stop. They've been dormant for ages, and now they're hungry. If you want to survive, you need to learn how to protect yourselves." After long debate, the council agreed to let John teach basic defense to any Lumari willing to learn. To John's surprise, Zephyr was the first to volunteer. "I felt the fear of those children," Zephyr explained later as John showed him how to make a simple spear from a fallen branch. "I never want to feel that helplessness again." Over the next few days, John learned more about the Lumari biology. They lacked adrenaline glands and had no natural fight-or-flight response. When faced with danger, they simply froze, a reaction that had served them well in a world without predators, but would be fatal now. "You need to overcome your instinct to freeze," John explained to the small group of mostly younger Lumari who had joined his training. "When you see a burrower, you must move, make noise away from where others are hiding." The concept was difficult for them. Several Lumari became physically ill when trying to imagine harming another being, even in self-defense. Their telepathic nature made them feel the pain of others as their own. Zephyr, however, showed unusual ability to adapt. "I can separate my thoughts from the feelings," he explained to John. "I can think about protection without feeling the pain that might come with it." This separation was radical for the Lumari. The elders watched with concern as Zephyr and a few others practiced with simple wooden shields and spears. "You are changing them," Vex said to John one evening as they watched the practice. This knowledge can never be unknown. Would you rather they died? John asked bluntly. Vex's skin showed complex patterns John had never seen before. No, but I mourn what we are losing. Our innocence. John understood. Earth's history was full of such moments, when survival required change, and change came at a cost. While training continued, John worked with the more technically minded Lumari to set up sensors around the settlement. They used parts from his ship to create simple alarm systems that would detect the vibrations of approaching burrowers. One night, as John studied the data he collected on the burrowers, he made a discovery. They're all coming from the same direction, he told Zephyr. There must be a central nest. What does that mean? Zephyr asked, looking at the map John had created. It means, John said, his face grim but determined, that there might be a way to stop them all at once, but it would be dangerous, very dangerous. Zephyr's skin pulsed with colors that John now recognized as resolve. Teach me what to do, and I will help. Outside, the ground trembled again. The burrowers were getting closer. Time was running out for the world without predators. The attacks grew more frequent. 3 days after the first burrower appeared, a group of 5 attacked the eastern side of the Lumari settlement. John and his small band of trained defenders managed to drive them away, but not before 2 Lumari were injured. John had never seen injured Lumari before. Their wounds glowed with a soft blue light as their bodies tried to heal. The elder healers gathered around them, joining minds to speed the healing process. It worked, but John noticed something troubling. The older Lumari were growing weaker. The psychic stress is too much for them, Zephyr explained when John asked. They feel every moment of pain, every fear. It drains their life energy. John looked around the settlement. The older Lumari skin had dulled, losing its vibrant glow. Meanwhile, the younger ones, especially those training with John, seemed to be adapting. Their colors still showed fear, but also determination, a new emotion for the Lumari. We're running out of time, John told Zephyr as they reinforced the wooden barrier around the settlement. The elders can't take much more of this. Zephyr nodded. What about your plan? The nest. John pulled out his scanner, showing the map he created. I've tracked their movements. The main nest appears to be here, in these caves about 3 miles from us. If we could somehow block the entrance or collapse it. Kill them all. Zephyr's skin flickered with conflict. Even now, that is difficult for us to accept. Not kill them, John clarified. Just send them back to dormancy. My theory is they've been sleeping for thousands, maybe millions of years. Something about my ship's energy signature woke them up. If we could reverse that somehow. John spent the night in his crashed ship, looking for anything that might help. He found what he needed in the ship's power core. It was damaged but still contained enough energy to create a significant pulse if properly triggered. The next morning, John presented his plan to the council. I can modify my ship's power core to emit a specific energy pattern, the opposite of what woke the burrowers. It might put them back into hibernation. Might. Vex questioned, his skin now permanently pale with exhaustion. It's our best chance, John said honestly. The council agreed. Having no better options, John selected a small team. Zephyr and 4 other younger Lumari, who had shown the most aptitude for defense training. They would accompany him to the caves while everyone else remained in the fortified settlement. As they prepared to leave, Mira, the oldest elder, approached John. There is something you should know, she said, her mental voice barely a whisper. Our oldest legends speak of a time when the ground shook and great hunger stalked the land. Our ancestors sang a song that brought peace again. A song? John asked, confused. Not music as you understand it, Mira explained. A vibration, a frequency that calmed the hunger below. John's eyes widened. That supports my theory. Sound affects them strongly. Your ancestors must have found a frequency that triggered their hibernation cycle. Mira nodded. The knowledge of this song has been lost, but perhaps your machines can find it again. With this new information, John modified his plan. He took apart his scanner and created 5 small devices that could emit varying sound frequencies. They would test different patterns until they found one that affected the burrowers. The team set out at dawn, John leading with his laser pistol, the Lumari following with their wooden spears and the sound devices. They moved quietly through the forest, stopping whenever John's sensors detected movement. A mile from the settlement, they encountered their first test. A lone burrower burst from the ground directly in their path. The Lumari froze instinctively, but Zephyr recovered quickly, remembering John's training. Spread out, he called to the others. Confuse it with different sounds. Each Lumari activated their sound device on a different frequency. The burrower thrashed its head back and forth, clearly disoriented. When one particular frequency played, a low humming tone, the creature actually backed away. That's it, John said excitedly. That frequency repels them. They adjusted all devices to match the effective frequency and continued toward the caves. John felt a surge of hope. Perhaps they could end this without violence after all. A solution that would honor the Lumari's peaceful nature while ensuring their survival. As they crested a hill, the cave system came into view. The ground around it was torn up, with dozens of tunnel entrances, and guarding the main cave opening was the largest burrower they had seen yet, twice the size of the others, its pale armor scared and ancient. The queen, John whispered. We'll need to get past her to reach the main nest. The team huddled behind a large rock formation, observing the massive queen burrower and the cave entrance she guarded. Her armored skin was pale like the others, but with streaks of blue that seemed to glow in the dim light. Unlike the smaller burrowers, she moved with purpose and awareness. She's intelligent, John whispered. Look how she's positioned herself. Perfect defensive position. Zephyr's skin flickered with nervous colors. How can we get past her? John checked the modified power core from his ship. It was ready, but useless unless they could place it deep inside the main chamber of the nest. We need a distraction, John said. The sound devices might confuse her long enough for someone to slip by. The plan was simple but dangerous. 3 Lumari would spread out and activate their sound devices at full power. While the queen was distracted, John and Zephyr would make a run for the cave entrance with the power core. Remember, John told the team, these creatures hunt by sound. Once you activate the devices, keep moving. Don't stay in one place. The Lumari nodded, their skin showing determined patterns that would have been impossible for them months ago. They had changed, evolved in their thinking. John felt proud of them, but also sad for what they had lost. On John's signal, the 3 Lumari moved to different positions around the clearing. One by one, they activated their devices, filling the air with a low humming tone that disrupted the burrower's senses. The queen reacted immediately, thrashing her massive head and emitting a piercing screech. Smaller burrowers emerged from side tunnels, equally disoriented. The clearing became chaotic as the creatures charged blindly toward the sound sources. Now, John whispered to Zephyr, and they ran toward the main cave entrance. They were halfway across when disaster struck. One of the Lumari, a young female named Lyra, tripped and fell. Her sound device skidded away, going silent. The queen's head snapped toward her, all attention focused on the now helpless Lumari. Without hesitation, John changed direction. Get to the cave, he shouted to Zephyr. I'll help Lyra. John raced toward the fallen Lumari as the queen charged. He reached Lyra just as the queen lunged. Pushing her aside, John fired his laser pistol directly at the queen's face. The beam struck her between her sensing organs, but seemed to do little damage against her thick armor. The queen's massive jaws snapped shut on John's leg. Pain exploded through him as her teeth pierced his flesh. He cried out, firing again and again at the creature's head. Zephyr, seeing John in danger, made a decision that changed Lumari history forever. Instead of continuing to the cave as ordered, he turned back. Picking up a fallen spear, He let out a cry and charged the queen from behind. It was the first time in the history of their world that a Lumari had deliberately attacked another being. The spear struck a gap in the queen's armor near her back legs. She released John, turning to face this new threat. John collapsed, blood flowing from his wounded leg. He saw Zephyr standing before the queen, spear raised, skin glowing with a fierce blue light, never before seen in a Lumari. "Go!" Zephyr shouted to John through their mental link. "Complete the mission." John knew he couldn't waste Zephyr's sacrifice. Dragging his injured leg, he crawled toward the cave entrance, while Zephyr kept the queen distracted. The other Lumari continued moving and activating their sound devices, keeping the smaller burrowers confused. The pain was overwhelming, but John forced himself forward. He reached the cave entrance and pulled himself inside. The main chamber lay ahead, a vast space filled with eggs and dormant burrowers. At the center was a strange, glowing crystal formation, the heart of the nest. John dragged himself to the crystal and placed the modified power core against it. As he activated the device, he heard a terrible scream from outside. Zephyr was in trouble. The power core began to hum, emitting the special frequency that Mira had described from the ancient legends. It grew louder, resonating with the crystal formation. The dormant burrowers in the chamber began to twitch, then grow still again. It was working. But outside, his friends were fighting for their lives. John needed to help them, but his injured leg made movement almost impossible. He had to make a choice: stay to ensure the device completed its cycle, or go back to help his friends. John Harris, the human predator who had changed this world forever, made his decision. He tore strips from his shirt, quickly bandaging his leg, then began the painful crawl back toward the entrance. He would not abandon those who had trusted him. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Pain surged through John's leg with every movement, but he forced himself forward. The sounds of struggle outside grew louder. As he reached the cave entrance, he saw a scene of chaos. Zephyr was pinned beneath the queen's massive claw. The other Lumari were trying to help, jabbing at the queen with their spears while keeping the smaller burrowers at bay with their sound devices. They fought with a coordination that would have been impossible months ago. John pulled himself up against the cave wall and raised his laser pistol. With careful aim, he fired at the exact same spot where Zephyr's spear had struck earlier. The queen's armor, already weakened there, cracked open. She reared back in pain, freeing Zephyr. "The device is working," John shouted. "We need to hold them off for a few more minutes." Zephyr scrambled to John's side. The young Lumari's skin showed patches of darkness where the queen had injured him, but his eyes remained determined. "You should have stayed in the cave," Zephyr said, helping John stand. "Not my style," John managed through gritted teeth. "Humans don't leave friends behind." Together, they faced the queen as she recovered and prepared to charge again. John fired repeated shots, aiming for the damaged section of her armor. Zephyr and the other Lumari coordinated their movements, confusing the queen with their sound devices. Deep inside the cave, the power core's hum grew louder. The frequency resonated through the ground, vibrating beneath their feet. The smaller burrowers began to slow their movements, becoming sluggish and confused. The queen, however, fought against the effect. She seemed to realize the danger and made a final, desperate lunge toward John and Zephyr. John pushed Zephyr aside and fired his laser directly into the queen's open mouth as she descended upon him. The queen crashed to the ground just short of John, her massive body shuddering. Around them, all the burrowers were now moving sluggishly, retreating toward the cave entrances. "It's working," Lyra said in wonder. "They're returning underground." One by one, the burrowers disappeared into their tunnels. Even the injured queen dragged herself back toward the main cave. Within minutes, the clearing was empty except for John and the Lumari team. The ground gave one final, strong shake, then grew still. The humming stopped. A profound silence fell over the forest. "Is it over?" Zephyr asked. John checked his scanner. The readings show them returning to a dormant state. They're hibernating again. The journey back to the settlement was slow due to John's injury. The Lumeri created a stretcher and carried him gently through the forest. As they approached home, they saw the entire community waiting for them. Vex stepped forward, his ancient eyes wide with wonder. "We felt the change," he said. "The hunger below has returned to sleep." The next few days were a time of healing and reflection. The Lumeri healers worked tirelessly on John's leg, their telepathic abilities accelerating his recovery. Though he would always have a limp, he would walk again. During his recovery, John's emergency beacon finally made contact with a passing Federation ship. The U.S. Intrepid responded, sending a message that they would reach the planet in 3 weeks. "They're coming to take you home," Zephyr said as they sat together watching the sunset. His skin had healed, showing fresh patterns of blue and green. "Yes," John said simply. "Will you go?" John looked out over the Lumeri settlement. So much had changed. The peaceful beings had learned about danger and defense. They had discovered courage and sacrifice. Some elders still struggled with these new concepts, but the younger generation embraced the knowledge while maintaining their gentle nature. "Your world is forever changed because of me," John said. "Not all of it for the better." Vex approached them, his skin glowing more strongly than it had in weeks. "Change comes to all worlds, John Harris. Perhaps we needed this change." "What do you mean?" John asked. "For countless generations, we lived in perfect peace, but we did not grow. We did not adapt." Vex gestured to the settlement, where young Lumeri were practicing new skills, building stronger homes, creating tools. "Now we understand balance. The deep sleepers will wake again someday, and we will be ready." On the day the Intrepid arrived, the entire Lumeri community gathered to say goodbye. John stood before them, healed enough to walk with a cane Zephyr had carved for him. "You have a choice," Vex said. "Your people await you above, but you also have a home here if you wish it." John looked up at the sky, then back at the faces of those who had become his friends. He thought of Earth, of human civilization with all its flaws and wonders. Then he thought of this world, where he had both broken and restored peace.